There we go. We're live.
Hey.
Right. Spits. 1 second. Okay. Hi, everyone. The Israel-Palestine conflict. Can it ever be solved? It's been 76 years. Political leaders couldn't do it. They haven't been able to do it. The pundits and the experts haven't been able to do it. Academics haven't been able to do it. Negotiators haven't been able to do it. And the people on the ground there currently definitely haven't been able to do it. And as time goes on, they're drifting further and further apart. They have completely different versions of what they believe, what they think the narrative of history is. And it's getting worse now with the most recent conflict. So nobody's been able to really resolve this. So Spitz, you and I
Let's
today.
do it. Let's do it. Us
We're going to do it today. This is what we're going to do. And so my guest today with me, the co-host, is Mookie Spitz, a good friend of mine. Spitz is a Jewish American author, strategist, communications consultant, and the son of Hungarian Holocaust survivors. I am a secular Muslim Canadian author and physician and scientific communications consultant, and I grew up in Saudi Arabia, Libya, and Pakistan. So both of us have been pretty close to this issue for our whole lives, been impacted by it or involved in some way or another, although as outsiders. So Mookie, I call you Mookie sometimes, Spitz sometimes. Most people are talking about, what's wrong. They're always bickering about the past, what happened in 1948, 1967, 87, 93, 2014, and on and on and on. And we've decided we're not going to go do that. We're going to just dive into this. We're going to look at the foundation of this issue, the psychological and the sociological roots, and the human roots of this, and use these insights to just unveil a prescription of. We've come up with 4 practical solutions, and some of these might surprise you. So, thanks, Spitz, for joining me again.
Yeah, no issue is more complicated, and if anyone can solve it, that's you and me, Ali, right? So
absolutely,
let's be so bold and rock and roll. In order to do that, as Ali mentioned, we've got 4 things that need to happen and that we'll discuss right now. And they're not necessarily linear, and they're all interconnected, but it's very, very important that the world gets buy-in on each of these individual foundational precepts, if you will, for peace to finally break out between Israel and Palestine after more than 7 decades. So let's give it a shot. The first thing that has to happen immediately is for Israelis to feel a renewed sense of security. 1,200 of them died, were mutilated, killed. Worst since the Holocaust. Israelis and Jews the world over are freaked out. And that's precipitated a lot of the problems that we've seen. That's number one. An adjunct of that is a ceasefire. Israel needs to feel secure, and Palestinians need to get stopped, blown up. And that has to happen immediately. And we'll talk about that. The next thing that needs to happen is a change in government across the board. Netanyahu and his entire militant right-wing nut job cabinet and advisors need to go. Conversely, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have also got to go. Now, how the hell could that be possible? Ali and I are going to argue that you're going to need an international coalition. Arab countries, the U.S., not too many cooks, but enough to get the job done in terms of guiding and acting as a liaison between Israel and the Palestinians. And what is the express goal of that coalition and this movement? It's continuous negotiations and open communication with the goal of a 2-state solution. Both sides, the Israelis and the Palestinians, need to buy in from the beginning and completely on this vision. Now, how to get there, that's the question. but they need to buy in on the reality that the Palestinians need their own independent state, and Israel needs to cede land and power. So once again, 1, 2, 3, 4, security, change in government, an international coalition, and a drive to a two-state solution. And let's pick these apart. Let's talk about them. If you've got questions, put them in the comments. And let's stick to practical stuff, folks. Let's not argue history. Let's not froth at the mouth as to who got us here and why. Let's not place blame. Let's accept the reality that in this tiny 8,000 square mile plot of land, there are 7 million Palestinians and there's 7 million Israelis. That's just how it is. And neither side is going anywhere. So we have two choices: continue this endless spiral of violence and suffering, or figure this the hell out. And we think by doing these four, there might be an opportunity to do that. Again, if you stick to pragmatic, prescriptive things that both sides and the world could and should do. So I'm going to get it going, Ali, by playing Israel.
Yeah. I want to say, and I might play both at some point, but I'll try to do my best with the personification thing too. I also want to say that whoever's listening, you may feel tempted to talk about, but this is who started it. This is what happened back then. You know, what about this? What about that? What about justice? Retrospectively, you can't. There's a lot of these conversations happen. That's not the point of this. There's loads and loads of podcasts and TV shows and everything out there talking about that. We're not going to get into that. The goal is to, there's a lot of people out there making a point. You can make a point or you can try to make a change. So we're trying to do it.
So let's rock and roll all together. So leave your comments. We'll field them. Step one. Okay, I'm playing Israel here for a bit. Step one, Israelis are freaked the hell out. A lot of the excesses we're seeing in Gaza has to do with a guttural blood vengeance as to what happened. And we can talk about that too. But the first step for this entire process to unfold is to chill the Israelis the hell out. And the way to do that is to absolutely ensure that October 7th will never happen again. And the way to do that, they've already begun doing. Shore up your internal defenses. The operation on October 7th never should have happened. A lot of people have gone into the Israelis, the intelligent failures that led to it, the heads up that they were given about Operation Jericho Wall, the heads up that they were given hours before the attack by thousands of SIM cards being changed right across the border. The list goes on and on.
The leader of the country trying to actually domestically get more power by taking over the judiciary. Like and he was distracted.
And then the backdrop of the entire society being fragmented, distracted, and most significantly, perhaps, of the 34 available IDF divisions, 32 of them were in the West Bank to protect illegal West Bank settlements, leaving only 2 on the border of Gaza. So the problems were systemic, extensive. We can go on how the IDF and Netanyahu and his cronies messed this up and exposed Israel to this attack. But the point now is you reverse that. You shore up your defenses on the border with Gaza. There's already discussions of a DMZ, kind of demilitarized zone between Gaza and Israel. You can say what you want about aggravating the problems that have been there for decades, but point number one needs to be attained. Israelis need to be secure. So whatever you do it. Shore up your army, create a DMZ, and assure people that regardless of what happens, the Israeli population is safe again. The flip side of that is ceasefire immediately. And the reason I bring that up and I say that these 2 points are interconnected is, let's say hypothetically Netanyahu has his way, carte blanche to do whatever he wants to do in Rafah, okay? Thousands more Palestinian civilians killed and wounded. Hamas is routed. Then what? That's the goal, right? Destroy Hamas. But where the hell are they going to go? They're going to diffuse back into the civilian population, much as they did during the October 7th attack. That's why it went on for days. The militants literally diffused into the kibbutzim and surrounding populations. It took forever to rout them out. Imagine what happens when the Israelis go heavy in Rafah. This illusion that Hamas can be destroyed to the man is exactly that. The idea of Hamas, the leadership of Hamas is in Qatar. And even if Netanyahu and his right-wing nutjobs got their way and went full out in terms of the Rafah assault, regardless of consequences, Hamas is not completely destroyed. So the two are complementary. Shore up your defenses and come to the realization that Hamas is an idea fed by decades of struggle, and a military solution in and of itself will not solve the problem.
Yeah, Hamas is a result more than a cause in many ways. Okay, and I got it. So like, no fans of Hamas here. I don't think. I mean, I think that Hamas is the reason why both the Israelis and the Palestinians are suffering right now, and the reason that both of them were triggered. So I want to kind of get into some of the psychology behind this, right? Where, especially when it comes to, you're talking about stopping the ceasefire. On October 7th, when the Israelis, that terrorist attack happened, and we all know how horrific it was, people's kids, their partners, their wives, brothers, sisters, they were brutally killed. How did Israel react to that? With what emotion? With vengeance, like you said, bloodthirst, vengeance, anger. Now you've got more people than that, 10 times, 15 times more people than that in Gaza, being, again, losing their kids, seeing their parents, their sisters, brothers, everybody getting blown up. They're human beings just like anybody else. Why would you expect them to respond any differently? You're, by trying to destroy Hamas, you're creating the same thing, and you're creating a much bigger Hamas in a way by doing that. You are, when they talk about, you're creating terrorists. Every terrorist you kill, you create more terrorists. I mean, this is like, we're watching it happen.
Yeah, and what's the next step? It's obviously an extended insurgency, not just in the south where they're currently concentrated, but throughout all of Gaza. So even a best case military scenario for the IDF won't eliminate the problem. And to your point, their actions and their excesses in Gaza have exponentially increased the enthusiasm and support for the cause that underlied it in the first place.
Yeah,
it feeds the perpetual cycle of violence. And Hamas knew this. One of the principles of asymmetrical warfare is to trigger the shit out of a power greater than yours and then win the information war. And clearly that's a win. They've accomplished their goal.
So that's why the ceasefire is important. Actually, I think it's probably too late at this point. I mean, this hate is now going to be it's been seeded again for probably a couple of generations until we actually come up with a plan. That's kind of what's been informing this. But if we look at what the triggers are for each side, what is the main trigger for Jews, right? There is the memory of the Holocaust, memory of the pogroms, memory of their women and children being burned, gassed, tortured, cleansed, destroyed in World War II. That was the whole reason for the creation of Israel. That's their trigger. The trigger for Palestinians is the nakba, or what they call the catastrophe, which is the mass displacement that occurred during the creation of Israel back in 1948. That They were forced violently out of their homes. Then they went into a decades-long unjust and illegal occupation. Now, what has Hamas done? Their attack on October 7th was done in the style of the Holocaust, the pogroms, like, their babies being burned and put in ovens, women being raped and killed while they're being raped. It was horrific in the same way that the Holocaust was horrific, and it was in large numbers. And that trigger was activated in one of the worst ways since the creation of Israel. And then what did they do? They triggered an overreaction from Israel. And now, with the bombing and everything that's happening in Gaza, the Palestinian trigger has been activated, where they're again being asked to leave their homes. They leave their homes get bombed. They go into smaller places than one of the most densely populated places in the world, nowhere to go. And now they've all collected in the south. And now there's talk of an operation that's going to happen in the south. And tens of thousands of people, kids, half the population is kids, and they're all being killed. So what Hamas has done, and I'm going to quote right now Jessica Stern and Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote in the Foreign Affairs magazine. They had an article on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the psychology of trauma. And they wrote, quote, "Both the Israelis and the Palestinians are now locked in a snare of Hamas's creation, a traumatic embrace of death and despair in which each side, understandably seeing itself as a victim, feeling righteous rage, and desiring retribution, is vying for global sympathy."
Yeah, that nails it. That nails it.
That's it. And the ceasefire is absolutely necessary. You're right that if we look at these triggers, these historical triggers for both of these populations, Israeli security is paramount, and an immediate cessation, like an immediate ceasefire, is absolutely essential. Both of these things are essential.
Yeah. So Israel shores up its border. Israel shores up its border. They're safe. And Palestinians stop getting blown up, and we stop this feeding cycle of exponentially increasing violence. Time out. Israelis have gotten their retribution in droves, and now it's time to roll the sleeves up and do what should have been done decades ago.
So this has been happening. Everybody, now you're hearing this and you're saying, yes, so what? Everybody's been saying it. And yes, everybody has been saying it. Reinforce the border on Israel, immediate ceasefire in Gaza, stop the war. Now the question is how? That's what the problem is. We don't have people on either side who want to, Hamas is, they're hiding out in their tunnels and they're hanging out in Qatar. And while they've left their population to just go, the population, by the way, they're not allowed in the underground bunkers. So they're actually not allowed to go into the tunnels that Hamas hides in. So the idea of the human shields is not propaganda. So now they've left them out, to be bombed. And on the other hand, Israel is, there's no indication that Netanyahu wants to stop it. The U.S. and Israel's relations are at an all-time low. And that's an understatement. It's never really been like this. Essentially, Netanyahu has that reputation throughout the world of just being an asshole. Nobody really likes him. None of the world leaders like him. Even his allies don't really like him as a person. And people are having to choose between people who are supportive of Israel now have to oppose Netanyahu, because they actually, in a way, want to protect Israel from Benjamin Netanyahu. So the question is, how do you do this? I mean, this is not somebody who wants an immediate ceasefire. He's repeatedly said that he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want a two-state solution either. So is this where we get to the next step, Muki?
Yeah, I think change in government. Netanyahu and his administration has got to go. And conversely, when we're discussing this trajectory toward Israeli-Palestinian peace, it's quid pro quo. Israel makes a move, Palestine makes a move, the world needs to make a move. So in that gesture, the Israelis need to hold elections, and they don't need to wait for elections. This argument that a country, even a small one like Israel, can't change leadership in the midst of a conflict like this, I think is bullshit. They should do it. They should do it as quickly as they can. There's already tens of thousands of protesters on the streets. Netanyahu's own apartment was protested against just the other day, and the
The Knesset.
opposition is building. The Knesset,
Mhm.
his opposition is forming. It's a highly contentious government anyway. Parliamentary democracy is the messiest kind there is. The coalitions have largely caused this mess because of his need to form a coalition with the extremes. So get him out of there. Hold elections on the Israeli side as soon as is logistically possible.
Yeah. So Benny Gantz has come up, one of the opposition leaders come up and called for elections as early as September. It still feels like a long time considering everything that's happening here.
It's an eternity. It's an
Yeah.
eternity, especially with millions of Palestinians on the brink of starvation. No change in IDF strategy is evinced by blown up aid workers, which are now front page news, and an imminent assault of Rafah, which Netanyahu vows will go forward as planned. The Americans were literally outraged that the IDF had no plans for feeding the people fleeing Rafah. That was just front page news today. So what the hell are they doing?
Yeah. And let's also talk about something that's absolutely unprecedented when it comes to the U.S. and Israel, and that is the Jewish person who's at the highest level, the highest ranking Jew in the United States government, has come out and called for regime change, mentioning Netanyahu by name.
Yeah, Schumer grew a pair, and it's great.
Yeah.
Biden needs to grow a pair too. And
Biden actually said that he completely endorsed Schumer's. Obviously,
yeah, whatever. It's just verbiage. We give them billions in aid, and we just sent a shipment of arms to their coffers, right?
Simultaneously, while we told them,
this is hypocrisy and horseshit. Okay, if you're the world's #1 superpower, and your friend and deep ally is fucking up, then you need an intervention. And we need leadership with balls. Pardon the the sexist connotation there, but they need cojones, which is, you know what? Israel needs conditions put on aid. I'm a Jewish guy, and I'm saying, Biden, put conditions on Israeli aid because they're shooting themselves in the foot locally
today
and internationally. So that will bring about change. Basically, Netanyahu has a blank slate doing whatever he wants. He says, yeah, sure. American military advisors have been informing the IDF on taking a more targeted approach. Yeah. Like the old Jewish guy in the deli. Yeah. There's 3 types of Jews that I could just maybe talk about for 1 second. You have the militant Zionist, okay? And the militant Zionist is characterized by Gordon Levy's observations. He's a lefty journalist in Israel, and he's right. Jews think that they are chosen. They're the chosen people, so we're special. Same rules don't apply to us. We're always the victim, even when we're the aggressor, and we're racist. I'm Jewish. I'll come right out and say it. Many of my brethren here and in Israel think Palestinian people are subhuman. So it doesn't matter how many of them we blow up and starve, they're animals anyway. Okay? People believe this. In their depths of their heart, they believe it. People I know, and you can rest assured a lot of the Israeli population feels this way too, especially after October 7th. That's the one type of militant Zionist. Everything Israel does is right, and if you disagree with Israel, you're anti-Semitic. Done. That's end of story. The other type of Jew, which is very much an American phenomena, is the leftist apologist, especially the younger Jews who know Israel only as a bully. They go protesting with the Palestinians, and many of these young, progressively liberal folks actually think Hamas is a cool organization. They're freedom fighters, okay? Even when, you could be LGBTQ all you want here, the second you walk into Rafah, they're going to string you up. But they don't think that way. They see Hamas as this progressive, enlightened, peace-fighting organization. Diametrically opposite types of Jew, especially in America. Now, there's a minority of Jews, I think. Some might argue that it's a majority. I think it's a minority. I exemplify this minority position. Chuck Schumer does, okay? And what we believe is Israel has a right to exist. Israel's cool. They embody our enlightened Western values. They have all these startups. They're an awesome culture, but they're completely ridiculous and self-destructive in their strategy, especially post-October 7th, and for decades vis-a-vis the Palestinians. We support Israel, we love Israel, but we think Israel is fucking this up. That's the three types of Jews. Mm-hmm. And what needs to happen is that the President of the United States needs to get it on here. He needs to put pressure on Israel as someone who loves Israel, like a good friend, to do the right thing. Get rid of Netanyahu, stop killing Palestinian children, and take a dual approach, which is targeted military operations for force and effectiveness, and diplomacy and negotiation and communication on the other side. Not hard, at least in concept. But there's so many emotions here, and everyone is so polarized that we're in this mess. And you don't have to make that hard, stupid choice. You can still love Israel as a Jew or anyone else and still think that they're making cataclysmic, self-destructive mistakes. Yeah. And if you believe that, take action. Do something. Get rid of Netanyahu. Hold elections. And then now we need to flip it around. What do you think the Palestinians could and should do? What about the Arab nations that are all around, who are always, MBS is shedding tears for the sake of the Palestinians, poor Palestinians in Gaza, when he blew up 200,000 Arabs in Yemen. Yeah. So I mean, the level of hypocrisy is enormous. The level of inaction is enormous. And I don't mean to come across just criticizing Israel, United States. Let's take a look at the Arab world. Let's take a look at the international community, who's always picking on Israel anyway. You have the Syrian civil war, killed 500,000 people. Yemen. You have one atrocity after another, 110 conflicts on the planet, and everyone's actually obsessed by Israel.
Yeah, so I want to get into that as well. And so what you did is you came out and you talked about how the reality of how, many Jewish people actually think of the Palestinians. Like, there is a reality, the deep in the heart thing, very similar thing on the other side. And again, I'll come out and I'll say this because I was raised in this. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I grew up in my book. The first thing I wrote about was when we were making snowflakes as kids, and out of paper in Saudi Arabia, making snowflakes. Doesn't even snow there. But he folded a piece of paper, opened it up. I was 10 years old, and someone from the Ministry of Education who came in. I went to private American school. They would do a sort of survey to make sure everything's good and legit. He came in, he saw the snowflakes, made everybody cut off one tip from the snowflakes, all us kids. And now we have these 5-pointed snowflakes with one thing amputated. And the reason, our teacher told us after a lot of prodding, because we were very confused, this guy came and destroyed our art, was because the Star of David has 6 points. That was my introduction to the Jews. That's how I learned about who they are. That's it. So it's in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, 5th grade, in an American school, where with people with 80 different nationalities. And that's also how all of the other kids in my class learned about the Jews. So we've heard this rhetoric the whole time, and two things can be true, right? Two things can be true. Yes, the occupation is terrible. The settlements are ridiculous. They're what's happening there, what the Israeli government has done. I mean, right from the beginning, expanding the settlements, taking over most of the land, occupying people against their will, everything that they've done in Gaza with the embargo and limiting food and water, and actually having a sort of food quota. Some of these are documents that came out. These are just straight up human rights abuses that they're doing, and that's absolutely true. All of that is horrific. But it's also true, there's a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism in the Arab world and in the Muslim world,
in the whole world, in the whole world,
in the whole world.
It's not an exaggeration.
Family,
Most
it's not
people hate Jews.
So
I agree.
they do. So that does exist, and there is, yes, when Palestinians are killed in Syria. I mean, Assad killed a lot of Palestinians, right? He killed a lot of Palestinians.
He said killed a lot of everybody. No one seemed to notice.
Everybody, 500,000 people. What we're also forgetting is when Muslims kill Muslims, there was an Arab Muslim, Omar al-Bashir, who killed 500,000 or more, like Black African Muslims in Darfur, Sudan. That conflict, you didn't hear much about that either. There weren't all of these protests. It does make a difference when it's Jewish people doing it. So the argument against
Jews
this
are news. That's a common. Jews are news.
I mentioned this. I'll mention this to other sort of secular South Asian and Arab and other sort of Muslim people, even those who are secular and sort of liberal, and they'll say, well, this is whataboutery. Why are you bringing in the other conflict? Right now we're focusing on this. Well, we're bringing in the other conflict is because if you want to talk about the reason why you're doing something, you have to understand that if you're singling out, one conflict or one entity over another, there's a reason for it. Right? There's especially when the numbers are a lot less, the scale of devastation. I mean, initially when the Gaza war was happening, to show the scale of devastation, a lot of people put up pictures from Syria, and they said that this was Gaza. There was a lot of confusion about what was what. So there is, both of these things are true, and yes, there is what you're talking about, like deep in their heart, a lot of Jewish people, even many liberal progressive Jewish people, they think of Arabs as subhuman. They do, like not just Palestinians but all Arabs. And the same way, a lot of Muslims and a lot of Arabs, they just look at Jews as people who are running the world, and they're evil. They're all kind of getting together. You should never trust them. It's a trope.
So that's baseline. So how do we jump over that baseline? Well, this leads us to number 3, which is the Israelis can hold elections, and they've got an organized government and a leadership, but Gaza and the West Bank have huge issues, especially when you have to get rid of Hamas and the PA. So the big question is, and then again, Israel has no idea what follows, whatever the hell they're doing. The world needs to step in. And most significantly, I think the surrounding Arab countries need to grow a pair as well. So they need to shift this hypocritical stance of crying crocodile tears for Palestinians for decades now, essentially using them as a hedge against Israel. And they need to step up. And what Ali and I were thinking is the creation of some kind of coalition. I'm a marketing guy, brand it something like the Israeli-Palestinian Coalition for Peace, whatever, give it an acronym, and have key representation from maybe everyone but Iran. We haven't talked about Iran.
We're
Saudi Arabia, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE through the Abrahamic Accords, okay? We're on the brink of signing a security deal just before October 7th, and that's no accident either. And that's a whole sidebar kind of conversation. But Israel already has these growing relationships and normalization with the Arab world. And the Arabs keep saying how much they care about the Palestinians. So let's bring these two things together.
The Arabs want that too. They want it. There was a time when, the way that countries used to fight or they used to form alliances, it was all based on, there was military, how strong your army is, whoever's more powerful and who's not. Now all of those relationships, all of the warfare, everything is economic. Right? You have the more violence and issues you have in a place. I mean, when the euro currency came out in Europe, it was, we had the Yugoslavia, everything was happening there at the time. The Bosnia and Serbia, there were wars going on. Nobody really did anything about it for a while. And then, they stepped in and they put an end to it because they were going to launch this whole thing, the European Union, because it disrupts stability, economic stability. And that's very important. That's why you're seeing these alliances. Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia specifically has a generational problem where, you know, the older generation was very into Palestine, was like a very close emotional issue for them. The new generation doesn't really, because they're tired of it. You know,
Yeah,
they
and it's
want to
the
normalize things,
inversion
they
of
want
the
to modernize.
Americans, actually. You know,
Yeah.
the Americans now, the younger generation are all pro-Palestine, and then this, you know, this bilateral enthusiasm and, you know, unconditional support of Israel is starting to shake because you have all these younger voters coming into the fray who know Israel only as a bully instead of the underdog. So there's this
Yeah.
demographic shift, and you're describing kind of a mirror image in Saudi Arabia. But overall, what's happening is a realpolitik, right? Which
Mhm.
is just a realization that it is economics, it's power, and there's a benefit for these allegiances, which outweigh the status quo of what came before. So that's a great foundation. Start right there. You know, Israel needs to use that leverage not to alienate the Arabs, piss them off by blowing the hell out of Palestinian kids, but show a willingness to change their own government, encourage the Arab countries to get Hamas and PA the hell out of there by working their own populations, creating a movement of change with the express goal of bringing peace to the region.
Yeah.
And
So
that has to happen. It can't just be Israel. It can't just be the United States. And I think the Arab nations will be significant
mhm.
to enabling this to happen. And they need to
There's
step up.
Yeah, so there's also something really, really interesting happening right now that's also very unprecedented, and that is that the U.S. and the Biden administration, in reaction to everything that Netanyahu's been doing, is talking about potentially recognizing a Palestinian state. Right? This is
Go for
something
it. Yeah.
this is something that hasn't happened before. In a way, it's to kind of show who's boss, you know, establishing American leadership. And what this does is it gives, because, you know, if you have the US recognizes a Palestinian state, Spain today announced that they're going to recognize a Palestinian state. They're going to recognize it as a Palestinian state in July, just a couple of months from now. You know, the UK has talked about recognizing them as a state in the UN. They've already been admitted as an observer state in the UN from 2012, but now they're talking about recognizing it. So this is something that is already forming an international coalition.
Well, we better get ahead of it because Hamas is still in control,
Yeah,
ostensibly,
they are.
right?
So
So good
the
luck with
idea
that.
is what that does is once recognizing a Palestinian state, this is something where there's direct relationships that can be made with the people of Palestine, and it actually gives them leverage. It helps them use that against the leaders. Like if you have incompetent leaders that you're not happy with, right, and like they do with the Palestinian Authority. And again, a lot of, you know, Gazan people, they don't have much of a choice. You have Hamas is the only. You have one side that's totally corrupt. The other side comes in, gives you sandwiches and things like that, and gives you food, you know, the hospital services. So those are the people that you're gonna support because you don't have that much of a choice. But now, if you know that there is a significant part of the world that's supporting your statehood, what is Hamas gonna do? I can guarantee Hamas is gonna come out against it. They're not gonna want to do it. There's a lot of people in Palestine who will be open to the idea of a Palestinian state. Right now, in polls, they're not going to say they are. Not going to say they
Yeah,
are.
but where is Hamas leadership right now? They're chilling out in high-rise luxury apartments in Qatar. Okay,
Yeah, this is the way. It's the way to do it. It's a way to weaken them.
yeah, but what I'm saying though is our number three, Qatar needs to say, "You done? You're
Mhm.
finished. Hamas is done." That's part of
Yeah,
the deal here.
yeah,
Number
and
three, you're done.
that comes from those alliances, right? That comes from the
That's what I'm
international
talking
coalition.
about.
Yeah.
So if Israel is going to get rid of Netanyahu, if Israel is going to stop building settlements, if Israel is going to take seriously the idea of a Palestinian state, then guess what? Quid pro quo, you get rid of Hamas.
Yeah.
Done. You get rid of the Palestinian Authority. Done. And then there's a few other agreements that need to be made. Foundational precepts for moving forward. For
There's
example,
a yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, and I'll
yeah,
chime in.
so what has to happen? The Arabs lost the war. The Palestinians lost the war. That means in a best case scenario, 22% of the land is yours, Gaza and the West Bank. In a best case scenario, the Palestinians need to unequivocally understand and accept that the best case scenario for Palestinian statehood is 22% of the available land. That means 72%, 78% is Israel. You need to agree on that. This idea from the river to the sea, as leftist apologist Jews love to stay on the Harvard campus. Is bullshit.
Yeah.
Is bullshit. If you got to accept certain things, and again, quid pro quo, Palestinians, you lost the war. Israel is here and it's not going anywhere. Fact, fact, fact. Best case scenario, 22% of the land. Israel, what the hell are you doing in the West Bank? Okay? The reason that you keep building and expanding settlements and fortifying them and securing them is to preclude Palestinian statehood. Anyone who argues differently is completely full of shit. That's the express purpose. Israelis don't want to cede land, they want to take land, and they don't want to give Palestinians power. So quid pro quo. Palestinians need to eat humble pie. 22% is all you'll ever get. And Israel needs to accept that they need to give it up. They need to give up the West Bank, and they need to give power to the Palestinians.
Yeah, and they need to not just stop building more settlements, but to dismantle all the ones that.
Let me share an interesting tidbit. I thought about this just the other day. The number of Palestinians who were kicked out of their land for the nakba, right? If I pronounce it, was about 700,000. Guess what? There's exactly 750,000 Jews living illegally in the West Bank.
It balances out.
There you go. I'm not kidding right now. Okay. So if Israel really wants peace and they really want to play ball, and you go with this 2278 distinction and you mean it, right? And it atones for whatever happens. 700,000 Arabs got kicked out by the Jews, and the Jews are going to vacate the West Bank, 700,000 of them. Guess what? We're even. Nice job, guys. And then you go forward. Now, do I think this is going to happen tomorrow? Do I think this is ever going to happen? I don't know. But I'm just looking at this objectively. And if this is Israel in the year 2300, so be it. But this realistically is a solution. And it's fair, and it's equitable, and it's honest. And anything short of that is hypocrisy and lies. It's kicking the can down the road. It's mowing the lawn. It's Palestinians who deny the existence of Israel and say death to the Jews and from the river to the sea. And it's Israelis in a complementary and equally ineffective way, continually just recycling this violence and this conflict.
Yeah. So there's this other factor, Mookie, right now, and that is that there's I don't know if they call you Spitz or Mookie. I don't know. I usually call you.
I know
Spitz.
people listening are going to call me all sorts of things.
Yeah, right now you'll be called. Yeah, I have a whole bunch of new names after this. They just accept the land. But here's the thing: right now there has been a war that's happened for 6 months. The devastation in Gaza has been horrific. So it is. And although I'm actually aligned with you, I agree. Israel's not going anywhere. The settlements have to go. All of that stuff is correct. Right now, there's people who are at just fighting for survival and fighting to feed their kids. So the question is, what can they do? What can the people on the ground do? Now, when we talk about this is what Israel can do, this is what Gaza can do, and we talk about this earlier about the asymmetry of it. Israel is a thing. It has a government, has an army, it has everything. The Palestinians, Gaza is basically run by a militant group that's hiding out in Qatar and in tunnels, right? So they've basically left the population out to die. They did their thing on October 7th, and then just disappeared. And they're like, all right, do the rest of you take this? And the more of you die, the
Yeah,
worse
they
is
got
your life.
exactly what they wanted. This is
They
a
got
huge
exactly.
win for
So we
Hamas.
know
Right.
this is this entire thing is being won by Hamas. I am not going to, if and all of you leftist apologists and everyone who's fans of Hamas, congratulations. You know,
Right.
you've won big
Right.
time, right? And so now there are things like what do people do in those kind of situations where they're downtrodden, right, and where they're really at the bottom of the barrel right now. And there are things right now, there's situations that are happening the way that the things are happening now. There's many unprecedented circumstances that Gazans have that they can actually leverage that their parents and the generations before them could not. Okay. Number one, the world is very sympathetic to democratic movements right now. It's very sympathetic. So this is something that Thomas Friedman wrote in a New York Times article a long time ago, where, and I don't fully agree with him, but I think that there's a modification of this that can work. And that is a suffrage movement, a non-violent suffrage movement. So historically, 76 years, there's been rockets, there have been bombs, rockets, bombs, rockets, bombs. It's been happening for ages, and nothing's really happened. So the violence thing really has not worked. It hasn't worked for 76 years. It's not going to work now. It's just not. Okay. It did not work on October 7th for the Palestinian people. It worked for Hamas, but it didn't work for the Palestinian people. It did not work for the Israeli people. So it's not going to work.
Well, it kind of did. It kind of worked for the Palestinian people. And, I don't mean to sound like my own kind of apologist, but we're having this conversation and the whole world is demanding a two-state solution. So, you know what I mean? It's like they got what they wanted, and in ways, the Palestinians, if they follow our plan, the Palestinians are ahead here.
Two-state solution should have been should have already been there. I mean, they didn't.
But it wasn't. It wasn't.
I know it wasn't.
Now everyone's talking.
You can't, like, the two-state solution isn't going to, like, when you have 50,000 people are dead, you're not going to have a two-state solution that's going to benefit people. But here's, like, what I mean is that generally there is suffering there. Yes, there's global sympathy. Yes, people are talking about what they should do. Everybody's involved in this, and that's a reason we're talking about this right now. There is the U.S. is distancing itself from the Israeli government. Everybody's kind of seeing the excesses of it. Everybody's outraged. So there's a lot of positives that have come out of it for the Palestinian people, and that's what I'm talking about leveraging. So imagine after Friday prayer, that's Jummah prayer, every week, Palestinians, and this has to be organized, they come out on the streets with signs like Tahrir Square, right, in Cairo, that brought down Mubarak, the dictator that was there for 40 years, was brought down by nonviolent protest. Nonviolent protest has a better historical track record of getting things done than violence does. Violence has worked. I'm not saying
we
it
need
hasn't.
Like Palestinian Gandhis.
Yes. So
the problem though is how do you, like, you grew up in it. I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of this is fueled by jihadism. You know what I mean? There's a deep Islamist ideology where
I'll get to that.
River to the Sea is right here. You know what I mean?
Let me just
fuck the Jews forever. The land is ours, and then that's it. How do you get past that?
So that's a good question, and then I'll get to that in a bit too. Let me just finish what I'm trying to say. So you don't need lots of Gandhis. You need a few. Okay, you need some leadership to come out, and this is something that that people do when they have nowhere to go. They don't need resources for this. So this is the kind of thing, they come out, they have a suffrage movement, a right to vote, just signs up in, like, Tahrir Square in Egypt in 2011. Just thousands and thousands of people on the streets after Jummah prayer, marching, saying we want the right to vote, right to vote. The world cannot ignore that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's Hamas 2.0.
Yeah.
Hamas 2.0.
We're talking about later in the set. Right now, we're talking about we've done this. We've gotten rid of Netanyahu. We've gotten rid of Hamas. We're further along in this, right?
All right, and then we were rebuilding Gaza too, right? Is Gaza being rebuilt at this point? So that's what I mean on the timeline. It's like, where are we?
On the timeline, this is something that can happen in parallel. right? And the other thing that they can do, right, considering this, and this is related to the international coalition aspect. Once there is an international coalition that is recognizing a Palestinian state, right, there are allies in the U.S. that are influential right now, right? These leftist politicians you're talking about, and university campuses in Congress, right, among the Democrats, who can form relationships where that people in Gaza can reach out to, activists there can work with to actually apply pressure and get this international coalition going, and come up with something more reasonable. And all of this is going to weaken Hamas. If you know that you have the world on your side, you don't need Hamas on your side.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
If
they gotta
you have
go.
other people, if all of us get together, we're like, hey, listen, Palestinians, we're going to help you. We're going to do it. What do you need? We're recognizing you as a state. We're going to help rebuild. We're going to help feed you. The only thing you got to do, you have to accept that this is the land, that this is your state, and you have to just stop the violence. Stop the violence. And then this is it. You know, we can do this. And now the United States is supporting you, higher levels of government. Spain is supporting you. The UK is supporting you. The UN has you as a member state. Okay, everyone. And then we've got, you know, Israel. Netanyahu's gone right now. There's a new government that's coming in, and they're just saying that here are the conditions that are tied. Don't mess with us anymore. Let's just agree to this. That kind of international support has not existed for Palestinians in the past. I know. I grew up in the 80s. There's nothing. We didn't even know what was going on over there. It was completely, everything was staunchly one-sided. So this is a very, very new development.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the grassroots,
yeah.
Right? Yeah,
grassroots. And this is the right time. This is right now. There's so much sympathy out there that this can actually happen, and it will be good for Israelis too. It will be good for everybody, right?
Well, it's extremely dangerous. So let's go to part 4 here. Continuous negotiations for a two-state solution. So let's summarize where we're at. The Israelis feel secure. The border's shorn up. The IDF got its shit together internally. Okay. Israel is no longer blowing up Gaza. By this point, there's rebuilding. There's some reconciliation, right? The problem is Hamas and the PA. We're tacitly assuming that they could be gotten rid of. Okay. Either actively from the top down. The honchos at Qatar say you're done. You're no longer funded. You're kaput. And then from the bottom up, in terms of what you're describing, where these grassroots movements for Palestinian independence and statehood is a global movement that is based not on aggression and violence, but based on peace and negotiation. Are we squaring off that way? Now, if even hypothetically we can attain this point, then it's still problematic and difficult, because a lot of entrenched ideas need to change. And if they can get to the point where we're actually having conversations and we're negotiating, the region was at this stage on and off repeatedly for decades. And one thing led to another. And depend on which history you follow or which tribe you belong to, it's always the other guy's fault. So the thing about Jews and Israelis, and this is true for almost all of them, it's always the Palestinians' fault. They always withdrew from the negotiations. They made either unrealistic demands or they changed their mind. And the next thing we knew, there was an intifada. Intifada. So,
oh, God, you're so Jewish.
Jews always blame the Palestinians. Talk to any Jew. Oh, it's not our fault. The Palestinians fuck this up every step of the way. And it's not our fault that we have to kill their kids. It's like Golda Meir said that we'll never forgive the Palestinians for having to kill their children. That's an entrenched attitude. So that's a problem. We keep blaming the Palestinians. And then the Palestinians, they keep blaming Israel, right? They took away our land. They can't be trusted. And some of this is substantiated with West Bank settlements, with ongoing violence, and with these overreactions and the periodic mowing the lawn. So something blows up in Israel and 1,000 Palestinians die. It's like a 100x, it's 1,000x retaliatory strategy to show determination and strength, which has really only succeeded in spiraling the violence. It hasn't quelled it. So how do we enable negotiation to take place between these? Like, how do you how do you, hit immovable object with an infinite force here?
Oh.
I'm asking you. You're the Palestinian. I'm the Israeli. I'm like, we blame you for everything.
Mhm.
Every time you hit us, we hit you 100, 1,000 times force. We have nuclear weapons. Our military is larger than that of Egypt, Syria, Iran.
Yeah.
Right? We actually have more operational jets, F-15s, F-16s, I think, than Americans do.
Oh,
Right?
really?
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable. Our arsenal is huge. So fuck you. That's the
Yeah.
mentality. So that's the mentality that Palestine and the Arabs and the world need to kind of massage, which is
Mhm.
why should we listen to you? Why should we cede land and power? Because you're always wrong. You just want to kill us anyway. And most of the world hates Jews. So welcome to the party, pal. This is fine,
Mhm.
the status quo. How do you change this attitude?
How do you change the attitude? That's a very good question. And
I mean,
that's the
and
challenge.
that's
And
why we're here. This
I
is
think
part
that's what
4. Now,
we're.
I got ideas. I'm just rhetorically asking these questions,
Yeah, no, that's
which is,
what we're here to talk
yeah,
about. I think that the attitude, the only way to change, like what we're talking about right now, change in leadership, change. I mean, there are people, many people in Israel who don't necessarily think that way. They don't want to be a pariah. Like there are
yeah,
many of them who don't care. Yes, it is true.
yeah.
After October 7th, I know that there are many people in Israel, and I've heard that they don't care. They're like, oh, well, the world thinks that we're evil anyway. The world thinks that we're committing a genocide. The world thinks that we're ethnic cleansing. So might as well, go ahead if that's what they want to think. We can own it. They're going to hate us anyway. So might as
Well,
well go
that's
ahead
the
and do it.
mentality. That's what's perpetuating the cycle now. Now, I have one recommendation, which goes back to the earlier part of this conversation, is that American presidents, grow a pair. And to your point earlier, it looks like they're going to have to,
Yeah.
because the way the demographic base is shifting, this idea of unilateral, bipartisan, unconditional support for Israel is unsustainable. There's
Yeah.
already fissures in that. The hesitancy and isolationism that's pervasive now with the Republicans applicable to Ukraine is having a halo effect even to Israel, compounded by the fact that Biden could very well lose Michigan. Okay, the Arab vote is relatively small, but it's got a percolating effect to young people in general.
Mhm.
Young people either, aren't going to vote or might even vote independent because of Biden not showing any cojones vis-a-vis Israel and
Let
Netanyahu.
me
So
contextualize
I
that a
think
little
the
bit.
missing link here is America, which is
The
America needs to slap Israel around a little bit, and Israel needs to know that this support is not forever.
conditional, and that's kind of what at least was said in the phone call today between Biden and Netanyahu's first one after the Wade
This
trucks.
gesture I'm making,
Yeah, I know, I
this
understand.
is Joe Biden right now.
Yeah, this is I understand. Nobody. That's what he just sort of reset the timeline. He's like, hey, if you don't do this, if you don't protect more civilians, we're gonna
APAC is
do
too
bad
strong.
things. Yeah, we're going
APAC
to.
is too strong. It's
Yeah.
the
So a
Jewish
lot of
lobby
it
is
is,
too strong. Yeah.
and they've all been saying we're outraged, but they're also still sending the funds for the weapons, and again, like in one of the most powerful militaries in the world. So, now what were you talking about earlier? I wanted to actually,
Changing attitudes, buddy. How are you gonna? We're at step 4. We worked hard. We got here. Maybe people believe that we're talking some measure of sense, where we bring security and we have a ceasefire, where we bring about regime change for both sides,
yeah,
and where
I
we
think,
get an
yeah,
international coalition. So
we're
my
talking
question
about.
is, how do you change attitudes using this construct? How do you put pressure on
Well,
Israel to chill the hell out? And how do you calm down Palestinians who hate Jews and just want 100% of the land for themselves too?
I think it's going to have to come from outside.
Right. Okay. So
It's not.
that's where we're
It's
getting
not
at.
going to happen on the inside. And then let me tell you, like this is, so I wanted to at this point talk about the misinformation thing that I'm very fascinated by, and I've talked to you about before, right? I hear there are polls that say, right, that most Palestinians support what happened in October 7th. Okay. Now, Israelis hear this. They're like, oh, wow. Most Palestinians support what happened on October 7th. That means they support the rape of our women. They support the killing of innocent civilians. They support the burning of babies. These people are evil. This is all the stuff they support. But you go and talk to the Palestinians and ask them what happened on October 7th, what they support. They're like, well, Israel killed its own people. There were no rapes. There was no civilian killings. Hamas didn't do that. This was a legitimate resistance movement. They've created all of this. Images have been generated. These videos have been generated by AI. They're very sophisticated and crafty. All of this October 7th narrative is bullshit. You know, it's not true. We don't believe it, right? But we support the resistance. So they're not supporting the rape and the kill of innocent civilians. They're supporting what they think happened based on a conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
On the other hand,
I want to reinforce.
One second. Let me just finish you. Now, on the other hand, what happens is that the Palestinians, they hear that the Israelis, the majority of the Israelis, support this military operation in Gaza. So the Palestinians, now the Gazans, are thinking, oh, wow, they're seeing our babies being blown up. They're seeing all these kids dying. They're seeing the aid workers being killed, and they support this. The majority of them support it. This is genocide. This is ethnic cleansing. You know, this is an evil regime. But you ask the Israelis, you know, what they think. They're like, well, we don't believe the numbers. They came out of Hamas, the Hamas Ministry of Information or Health or whatever they come out of. We don't believe the numbers. We think the numbers are a lot less. A lot of these people who died were terrorists. They're getting their version of the news, right? And they're not seeing images. Actually, in Israeli TV, they're not seeing images of all of the atrocities that you're seeing that we're all seeing on TikTok. Okay, so there is this completely, neither of them actually support the specific atrocities that the other is accused of, but both of them support a just operation, what they think is a righteous, just operation against the other one. So they have different versions of history. They've got different versions of news. They've got different versions of what they think is going on. And so that's why I don't think, right, that it's like two different planets on both sides of the border. You and I sitting here wouldn't even be talking if we lived in that part of the world. We wouldn't even be communicating. Okay, so because of that, I don't think people on the ground, they're like, well, you don't know the situation. You're not on the ground there. We're talking about people on the ground. People on the ground there cannot see this situation the way that we can. They just can't. So this solution that you're talking about, you know, this change in attitude on the Israeli side or the Palestinian side, or the Arab side, is just not going to happen. Intrinsically, it's not going to happen where it is. It's only going to happen from the outside. It's the United States getting involved, Arab countries getting involved, people here in the West getting involved, citizens getting involved, advocacy, people listening to each other outside of that. That's my rant. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to leap in and say that the same thing. You know, you were leading the witness. Is that the Israeli media is completely censored.
Yeah,
and the Israeli media, all they do is talk about hostages, and they talk about, you know, the operation, almost the special operation. There's no visuals of suffering Palestinians, and the average Israeli, to your point, has very little transparency in terms of what's actually going on the ground. So this is unequivocally true. And Netanyahu just issued an edict to censor Al Jazeera completely from the whole country. So, you know, that's a surprising.
You live among those Arab dictators for a long time. You're going to start acting like them, right? I mean, you got Putin
he's become a pro lately, you know,
you're
probably for a while.
100 journalists have been killed. You're killing aid workers, and then you're censoring the media just because you disagree with it. And you know, you don't have to agree with everything Al Jazeera does, right? But there are innocent Al Jazeera journalists. I mean, I've known people who work for Al Jazeera, and it's basically what he's doing is a Putin move. It's an Arab dictator move.
So, and it's only going to get worse with AI, right? It'll be exponentially worse. So how do you circumvent this problem? Well, if you can't change the digital world, the virtual world, then you change reality. And by this, I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of Israelis who are now displaced. The West Bank is in chaos. The Lebanese border is in chaos. right? And then the Gaza war is raging.
Yeah.
So the way to kind of from the inside out create this is by transforming of the lives of the people in the region for the better. So if Israelis can return to their homes in a safer environment, if Gaza could be rebuilt, if the international community, with an emphasis on their Arab neighbors, comes in to assist the Palestinians instead of talking about it, and if they can actually liaise with the Israelis, then there's hope. And just as we've had negative feedback for decades, perhaps we can initiate positive feedback through security, flip of the government, an international coalition, and a road to peace. And with, again, the acceptance of certain conditions.
Yeah, and I gotta say too, the Muslim people and the Arab people and everybody that I grew up with, the world the way it is right now, things have never been this balanced in terms of support. Right now in the United States, according to polls, people under 35, more than 50% of them have sympathy with the Palestinians versus Israelis. And not
it's
they're right or they're wrong, but they do, like you said.
That's what I mean. It's the future. Israel needs to understand that their good buddy, the U.S., isn't going to be so generous and unequivocal as it has been.
This is this is where it is. People
Bill Maher was raging against the Palestinians. I like Bill Maher in general. I agree like 95%, but 5% I'm like, come on, dude. My 5% come on, dude, with Bill Maher is when he's raging about the Palestinians. He says, come on, man, you lost the war. Look at the American Indians. Look at history. People win, people lose, and you guys are a bunch of whiners. You can't take your loss and just deal with it. The reason that he's wrong, and the reason that attitude perpetuates this cycle of violence, and the reason it's relevant for what we're talking about right now, is that geographically Israel and Palestine are so small, like 8,000 square miles in total, the size of Vermont. These people are compressed together and they're about equal in population. So you could kick another nation's ass, right? The tribe of Judea kicked these, the offspring of Esau's ass. Okay, great. The Jews won. They were provoked. Any which way you look at history, the Jews, air quote, won. They took the land. All right. But the Palestinians aren't going anywhere. They're right there with unbelievable population density and compression. When the white people swept across the Western Plains, we killed most of the indigenous population. And then the ones that were left, we put them in these little reservations, okay? And we isolated them, right? And these reservations are like maybe the size of Israel, right? So we were able to do that as white conquerors. We were able to annihilate the indigenous population and take complete control of the continent because it was so vast. And our population was so much disproportionately larger than theirs. But that's not the case in Israel. The reason Bill Maher's wrong, and the reason most people are so wrong about this issue, is that everything they say begs the question of attaining any kind of peace and security. And it's obvious. The Palestinian population is almost identical to that of the Israeli. They're miles apart, not oceans. And neither side is going anywhere. And the land is cherished, even though it's shitty for natural resources. It means so much for the world's religions. Everyone's got a stake. Everyone's got a story. So everyone is stuck there. And the reason people need to listen to our 4-point plan is because really, if you think about it, there's no other way to get out of this. And if you plot the population curves, right, the Palestinians are going to outnumber the Israelis, and then the Orthodox Jews are going to outnumber the regular Jews. Okay, so Israel is going further and further to the right, becoming more and more fanatically extremist, and the Arab Palestinian population is growing at a much more rapid rate. So just do the math, folks. You could have nuclear weapons and a bunch of jets and a fresh batch of 2,000-pound bombs from Uncle Joe Biden,
Yeah.
right? Uncle Joe. But it's only a matter of time, and this entire house of cards is going to really collapse. Israel will be in an existential dilemma
Well, Israel,
sooner than they think. They almost already
with the,
are.
yeah, with the population demographic, like with the growth of the population, yes, the Orthodox Jews are growing at a fast rate, but there's a lot more Palestinians, and
That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. So
eventually, like if there is a suffrage movement where supposing all of the Palestinians come out every Friday after prayers and march with signs saying that we want to vote non-violently and the world is paying attention to it, and if they do get the vote and you have a single state, you don't have a Jewish state anymore. You have another Arab
well, that's
state.
the terror, right?
Yeah, and then if you decide not to give them the vote and you decide to continue occupying them or not give them their own state,
right,
then you don't. I mean, if you give them their own state, it's fine. But if you don't, then you don't have a democracy. Now you're occupying people against its will. So
it's a binary situation.
They can
definitely. And
in the future, Israel is going to have to choose between being either a Jewish state or a democracy, but not both, unless there's a two-state solution.
Bingo. And what they've done is kick the can down the road by mowing the lawn and basically perpetuating a hopeless situation that is not only doomed to fail, but is doomed to kill everybody.
It does feel like
that's just the reality, folks. It's like you don't need to be a rocket scientist to plot the curve.
It does feel like
Israel is fucked. And and that's not an opinion, it's just doing the math. So smell the coffee, seed land, my people. I'm going to make an announcement to my people. Seed land and power to the Palestinians, even if you hate them. And even if you don't trust them, and initiate trust step by step, because you're doomed. You're heading up against a brick wall, and it's going to be better for you too. And lastly, there are these peace miracles that happen. You know what I mean? Northern Ireland, they've tried a similar approach in the Middle East, of course, with Senator Morris and all that. But there's so many instances where, Cain and Abel are killing each other for generations, and then you can turn it around. And the road to turning it around is opening borders, is trade, is cultural exchange, is mutual respect. Look at the food that the Arabs eat, the Palestinians, and look at the food the Israelis eat. An Israeli salad. What the fuck does that mean? That's cultural appropriation, my guy. It's like falafels and hummus and pita, with the sun, you can't tell an Israeli apart from a Palestinian a lot of the time,
most
right?
of them
I mean, there's a lot of Israelis are dark. You got Ethiopian Jews, you've got Arab Israelis. It's becoming diverse. It's amazing. Culturally link, do trade, respect each other, do commerce, open up the border, be nice to each other, listen, be patient, try harder, because you got no choice. And get over this bullshit ideology. Like the other guy is always wrong. We have a right. Fuck you. It's like, and don't tell me because I'm sitting on my ass in New York that I have no idea what's going on. We're all enduring it.
That's what I want to say. I don't think we talked about the misinformation. We talked about how both sides believe completely different versions of the news and history. If there's a solution to this, there's a solution. It's going to come from outside. It's not going to come from there. The people over there, and Yuval Noah Harari said this, and said that it's impossible. It's impossible. Again, if someone is holding the body of their dead child in their hand, whether you're in a kibbutz in South Israel or whether you're in Gaza, in Rafah, it's impossible to think of yourself as both a victim and a perpetrator at the same time. You don't think of yourself as an occupier if you're Israeli. You don't think of yourself as a terrorist if you're Palestinian.
I get it. It's going to take a long time to heal.
You don't. Yeah, it's going to. So that has to come from outside. And here's the thing. I'm really sorry, but people who are on the outside watching this have a better perspective, a more objective perspective of the situation.
It depends, because we have our own biases. But Harari said something else too, which is great, and it's like the essence of his kind of worldview, which is we're storytellers. Okay, we we tell stories and we have maps in our mind of reality. And the maps in our mind are more significant than the stuff of the world. You know, we tell hero stories, we have an idea of ourselves, and with all the implicit biases and all that.
Well,
But
religion, money, human rights.
stories, though, are malleable. You know what I mean? It's like you could retell a story to the next generation, which is a story of reconciliation. It's a story of unification. It's a story of tolerance. It's a story of experience and patience and a goal of cohabitation. Let's start telling those stories instead of reminding each other how much the other tribe is a bunch of savages. That could be a good start.
Yeah. And it's not that the leadership aspect aren't savages. Unfortunately, you know, we've seen that it's pretty bad, and not only on the Hamas side, but also on the Israeli, like, you know, the food trucks being bombed, all of these videos of just innocent people coming out with the flags, and Israeli hostages themselves coming out without their shirts and with a flag, and then just shooting them on sight. And there's loads of
imagine what the Palestinian civilians are dealing with.
Yeah, right? Someone's going, yeah, if they did that, if they're doing that to Israeli hostages, if they're doing this to food trucks, like, yes, I said it here before. I was like, yeah, no, there's no moral.
We're chosen, we're victims, and we're racist. So of course we're gonna act like this. Let's get over ourselves.
The deliberate targeting is on both sides. The deliberate targeting, Israel's doing it, and it's not a good enough excuse every time you ask Israel, well, what about this? It's collateral damage. You know, you can't say that, hey, at least we're better than Hamas. That is not how a democracy, especially Western style democracy, works. That's not what we're supposed to say. So it's this stuff has to come from the outside. It has to come from the outside.
All right. Well,
let's reiterate, I guess.
I mean, let's summarize, and then people could comment, and we could follow up. And if we piss people off, that's great. But just make Israelis feel more secure. Shore up the borders. Right. Stop bombing the shit out of Gaza. Okay. It's like, is there a couple thousand Hamas guys running around? All right. There's going to be a couple thousand Hamas guys running around after you nuke Rafah anyway. Okay. And you're heading to Israel, you're heading toward an insurgency. Okay. Right. You're heading toward, you think you're going to hit Rafah and you're going to clean it all up and you're going to destroy Hamas with this attitude. They're going to flow out into all of Gaza, and you're going to have years-long insurgency. So good luck with that. Ceasefire and second.
And and I want to say one more. And if you want to, and I've said this before, but I got to say it because it drives me nuts, is that if you do want to, if your best excuse to the world is that, hey, listen, at least we're better than Hamas, don't deliberately bomb food trucks.
I don't know. Maybe the drone. The drone was just kind of
it wasn't a drone.
And it could have been bad intelligence. They could have gotten a phone call from some kid with a flip phone. A kid with a flip phone was like, the Hamas guy is in the food truck. And they don't give a shit. The Hamas guy's in the food truck, blowing all up. But that could have happened, right?
And I'm not saying this about the Israeli people. I'm saying this about Netanyahu, who is an enemy of the Israeli people. Like, you can't. It's just, if you're going out and you can like just pick out an Iranian general or something official in some place in Syria and have like a robot come and assassinate him and that kind of precision, you can avoid fucking food trucks.
Well, the Hellfire missile that killed the food workers was pretty fucking precise. It was equally precise. The manufacturers of those missiles, they're applauding each because they just hit it. It's the intelligence and it's the intent. Right.
Yeah, it's like, I love that unintentional targeting unintentional. Like it's like it's
so number one, cut this shit out. It's not going to help. And then we're at number 2, right? Which is, Netanyahu has to go as soon as possible, hold elections, and Hamas and the PA have got to go too, which is like knock knock, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. I've been telling, Biden to grow a pair. What are you guys doing? What the fuck is Egypt doing? They're like, not our problem. That's like, it's just Sinai, this.
want to mention something about Egypt, and May Salam, who's a Gaza war survivor, was on the show. This is a previous episode. Make sure you check that out. It was phenomenal. And she said, like, the southern border of Gaza, right, is obviously ruled by Egypt, and they're charging right now bribes of $10,000 per person for suffering Gazans who need medical help to be able to get out.
Of course,
so they're doing that. Yeah, and they're also taking the aid. There's war merchants who are taking the aid, right? That's being sent, the humanitarian aid, and they're selling it to starving citizens.
Of course,
for high prices. So there's that happening. Yes, absolutely. Egypt, Egypt, all the Arab countries. There's not. I mean, nobody cares about the Palestinians. Everybody's been walking over them. All of these people who are like, oh, we have sympathy for them and everything. None of them are going to take in the refugees. They're going to charge bribes for them to get out of Gaza. When they're suffering, they're going to sell them their own aid that's entitled that the world is sending them.
Of course, yeah.
It's just the whole thing. It's just, if I was living there, it's a living hell.
Yeah. So, the IDF isn't the only institution that sucks right now. So, and I'm the Jewish guy, so I'm criticizing my own because that's like my function here. But these Arab countries are not off the hook for this shit.
The only people that they hate more than the Jews, honestly, growing up in the Middle East, at least it was like that when I grew up there. The only people they hate more than the Jews are the Palestinians.
Yeah,
they can't. The Arab countries look down on Palestinians like the sort of the inferior.
Yeah, and we were talking to earlier, like that's endemic throughout the world. Like the Swedish people hate the Norwegians. We look at them and they're tall and blonde. We can't even fucking tell them apart, and they despise each other. And then the Caribbean people, the Cubans, they think they're the best. The Puerto Ricans hate the Dominicans. The Dominicans hate the Haitians. People are just, we're shitty xenophobic people almost, I think by instinct, it's programmed into us. So none of this is unique to the region. It's just exacerbated by all the attention and because everyone hates Jews. So, all right. So change the administration, number 2. Number 3, which is, I completely agree with you. There's got to be an international thing, which is an adjunct to what we were just talking about, which is the Arabs need to step up. The U.S. needs to grow a pair, and then get, the UK, they hate Israel ever since, Balfour and, Moshe Dayan blew up the King David Hotel. And, so all these European countries, everyone could have a little whatever. But get people vested and get people to kind of try to negotiate this thing and to scoot it along in any way that's possible. Even though that seems like a pipe dream, it's realistic in terms of creating some kind of coalition. And to your point, it's necessary.
Yeah. So and they can also help along number 2. I think an international coalition can help the world recognizing a Palestinian state, the world. Helping the Palestinians understand that, okay, this is it. This is the land you're going to get. This is
22%.
Israel's
there should be signs.
Israel's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Israel's
not going anywhere. That's all you guys get.
Yeah.
Sorry. And that's as if we clear out of the West Bank. That's what you get. If you are lucky, you get 22%.
Yeah.
That's like a best case scenario, guys.
So, and the longer it goes on, the less and less it'll be, unfortunately. So,
yeah. So and then lastly,
that's number 4.
Yeah, it's like this, however the hell this is going to happen, which to your point, we need to overcome our entrenched biases and this knee-jerk reaction, this like micro, primitive, tribal, nitty-gritty, shitty view that the other guy sucks, that my tribe is the best, and that's it. So, and I know that's hard to get over, but what can do it is if the living conditions of the people on the ground improve as a result of going through these motions. So the displaced people can find their homes again. There could be a overt movement toward progress. And as I'm mentioning, I don't want to downplay this, and I can't say this enough. People get along when they know each other, when they hang out together, when they live maybe not in the same neighborhood, but near enough where they kind of like cross paths. Most importantly, when they do business with each other. When Israel shut down Gaza and turned it into basically a gigantic outdoor prison, ostensibly for a security issue, a lot of good that did them. What it did was it shut down that connection between people. So you feel more secure in principle, but in practice, you're ensuring that you're never going to get along, and ultimately there's going to be an October 7th. You can't take 2.5 million people and close them off from the outside world, no matter what the fuck your rationale is. Shit like that's going to happen. I'm not being an apologist for Hamas, but you need to be completely nuts about human nature if you didn't think something like this would happen.
Hmm.
Right?
It's yeah, a lot of this.
So come on, we eat falafel. Eat a falafel, eat hummus, eat a fucking Israeli salad, and understand that genetically we're almost identical to each other. And all of this is bullshit, you know, and forget history and be pragmatic. 22% Palestinians, 78% Israel. Get the fuck out of the West Bank and call it a day.
Yeah, this is a lot of I think and I'm kind of end this with something that Yuval Noah Harari said that's really difficult to swallow. It's tough, but when you think about it, it's really the only way, and that is that you really have to, in situations like this, sometimes you have to choose between peace and justice. So if you want peace, right, you're gonna have to let go of at least some of the hunger you have for a retrospective justice.
Right. Look
there's
forward.
lots of people who died. Lots of people died. They're not coming back to life. There's a lot of terrible things that happen. It's not going to happen. They're not going to return. Right. Either there are issues that have happened. There's land that's been lost. That land is not going to come back. Israel has been created. It's not going to go away. The Palestinians, they need their own state. All of these things have to be accepted. If you want peace, you have to let the idea of justice go. Retrospective justice has to go so you can secure future justice. 100%. You got to work from that point onwards, and that, by definition, what peace is. That's a really, really, really difficult thing.
And you know what's in the past?
Yeah,
religion's in the past. All these, I'm just gonna say,
you and I, we have the
bullshit.
You're Jewish. Yeah, you're Jewish. I'm Muslim, but we have the same religion.
Which is, it's all horseshit, everybody. You've been lied to and manipulated for the sake of control. So get over it. History is bullshit in that sense. It's all nonsense. So stop and just.
And at least that's one place where we have a lot in common.
Falafel.
This is what happens. I mean, there's hummus on both sides. There's shalom and salam. There's
salam,
mashallah and mazel tov.
Isaac and Esau and all that. Come on, we both have our dicks are sliced. You know what I mean?
Antipathy.
We don't eat pig. We don't eat pig.
We don't eat
got our
pork.
Our dicks are sliced. Come on, you know.
That's what you do. You circumcise two huge tribes of people. This is what you get. You know, this is what's going to happen. Childhood trauma manifested.
On that note, I think that's the perfect note. Don't touch the family jewels, man.
Yeah, don't touch the family jewels. And here it is. So Spitz, my Jewish friend. I'm the one who grew up in the Arab and South Asian Muslim countries. He is, again, for those remember, he's the American Jewish son of Hungarian Holocaust survivors. We wouldn't be. The fact that we're having this conversation means that I think the promised land truly is here in North America, where Hindus and Muslims and Jews, Catholics and Protestants, everybody kind of gets along. And we have arguments, we have heated debates, but we're not banned from seeing each other, and we don't kill and maim each other. And just look here.
Enlightenment now. You know, read that Steven Pinker book if you haven't yet. Times are actually getting better, not worse, even though there's horrible clusterfucks like what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And Enlightenment values of cooperation, of empathy, of internecine trade. You know what I mean? It's all about sharing the hummus.
It's all about,
and we're headed in that direction. You know, there are fits and starts, but you know, embrace the values that are positive for humanity instead of negative, and look in the mirror when you're spouting that kind of hate, and ask yourself if that's beneficial to you and your people. And to Ali's great point about justice, right, and peace, it's about cohabitation. It's not about proving your point.
It isn't. Yeah. Again, do you want to make a point or do you want to make a change?
Yeah, and the points we're making is that this, I think almost everything we said is kind of basic and obvious, but the most basic and obvious things are the most difficult to do when you're stubbornly clinging to old religions, old ideas, and old hatreds. Yeah. So look forward, not backward, rock and roll.
Look forward, not backward, rock and roll. From the promised land, the real promised land of North America, the Jew and the Muslim, signing off. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And
yeah, we welcome your feedback, too, and we could follow up to address some of the points. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.